Awesome. I'm excited to dive into this episode of Marketing Hops here. We have Chris Belli on with us today. Oh, We go through some pretty exciting stuff as we go through this, but with Chris here, we're going to share some pints and perspectives on B2B marketing and sales and just some real talk in terms of what is going on in the space and things that marketers today really need to know to stand out, stand apart. But as we get started, as with the name of the thing, Chris, what are you drinking today? What are you having during our time together?
So it might seem a little boring, but I have a Miller High Life. Now, my hands aren't giant hands. This is what you refer to, or is what is called a pony. It's actually a 7-ounce beer. I'll give you some perspective. That's your standard beer, right? And then for those high nooners out there, there's your standard size for a high noon. And reason I chose the Miller High Life is we'll tie it into marketing. I think marketers these days are trying to get too fancy, kind of like trying to find too many craft beers, trying to use too much software. I think we can take it back to basics and you go to the local domestic product. The other thing I like about it is I used to drink ponies, not in a bottle, but out of a 7-ounce glass back home in Australia. Very common in the Australian pub for a number of reasons. One is they don't get warm. They're not given a chance to get warm. So if you drink faster, they always stay fresher and you end up a little bit drunker. So cheers.
I like it. I like it. Well, I'm sipping on I think it's a it's called Cold Smoke from Kettle House. It's a brewery out of Montana that my parents went by one time, loved, and they always make it a point to get a 6-pack anytime they're driving across country there. So I figured I'd pull out an old favorite from the fridge here, so we can go. So cheers. Let's dive in. So would love to hear just a little bit about your background. What's your career journey, and how did you end up kind of as a marketing executive where you are? Like, what did that journey actually look like?
Yeah, I started my career at a sports marketing agency back in Melbourne. It was actually a global sports marketing agency called Octagon, and they did everything from athlete representation to rights holder negotiations, event management, and anything basically revolved around the sports agency landscape. So that was kind of a fun little entry into not only a sports career but agency life as well. From there, I moved on to professional football club where I was selling sponsorships for a professional football
That's
club.
global football, right? Not American football as we go through that. Or you gotta keep me honest.
No, to keep you honest, that's Australian football, not rugby. That's the next question that was going to come out your mouth. I know that, but it's Australian football. YouTube it, look it up. Quite a fun game to watch. So I went from sports marketing agency to professional football, and then from professional football I went into horse racing and breeding on an international scale, and that was a hell of a lot of fun. And then I made the move about 8 years ago now from a kind of a career switch, but I went from hiring creative agencies in that world to working for a creative agency when I arrived here in the US 8 years ago.
What brought you to the US then? Because that's a pretty big jump from the sports and being in that whole vein um, into B2B and into the agency side. What first brought you to the US and what made you want to make that jump?
Yeah, no, I had a green card, so I married a girl from Indiana, and had a green card available to me, so I took that green card, and sometime in 2015, I packed 3 small children up, and we moved halfway around the world. With I probably wouldn't do it the same way again. Coming over here, no job, no prospects, no relationships, no connections, but we made the most of it, and it's all worked out.
Oh, that's awesome. You know, as you've kind of come up through your career, and especially as you spend time in the B2B space, what are some of the biggest challenges as you became kind of that first time marketing executive? Um, is What were those biggest challenges that you really came to see and experienced early on in your career?
Yeah, because I started at a relatively small agency. The big challenge that I had was the agency that I joined was almost bereft of any sales or marketing. So it
Hmm.
was, what do you fix first? And I thought revenue was the right way to go and fix revenue. Let's just let's just kind of pound the pavement and get the money flowing in again. And so we spent a good amount of time fixing sales. And once we had sales fixed, it took a couple of years to get the ball rolling on that and ensure that there was regular income and things like that. Then we kind of shifted our attention to marketing. And then the agency setting or the professional services setting when it comes to marketing is a little different than selling software, because you can basically only sell enough work for the amount of people that can deliver that work. Versus on the software side, you can release more licenses, sell more licenses, you scale that a lot faster. The other challenge that I had was the agency that I worked for was very much known for one person, and that was the owner. So it was shifting from a referral-based word-of-mouth business, capitalizing on that and continuing to grow and expand that and play off that, but also to turn it into a more of a demand gen play as well, so that we would capture some people that fell outside of that ecosystem that we were working in. Not an easy task, but did it fairly well over the course of a few years.
So what's interesting is you focused on kind of solving that revenue sales side first. One of the constant contentious issues that we hear about all the time is just this relationship between sales and marketing. Maybe it's different in the agency and services world, but how did you, was it kind of your role at the time wasn't necessarily focused on marketing, and so you were able to focus on the sales side, or did you experience any of that kind of conflict or contentiousness there between those two groups?
Yeah, I think when you talk about there's two schools of thought, right? Sales and marketing can't be the same person, or they can't coexist, or whatever it is. I'm of the school of thought that sales and marketing not necessarily should be the same person, but should definitely roll up under that revenue team. Fortunately, the agency was big enough, small enough at the time where I was able to do both. But one needed to, we talk about these things breaking each other. So if marketing's performing really well, it breaks sales. Too many sales are coming in. If sales are performing really well, it starts to break operations, because operations need to keep up with staffing. And then if operations are killing it, then administration needs to keep up with human resources issues and things like that. So I was fortunate that I was able to do both the sales and marketing. But there just comes a time where, as a salesperson, it's like I can't pound the pavement any harder than I have. Now we're at this inflection point where we really need to spend some money and make an investment into marketing. And that's when we had this kind of pivot point where I was able to build out a proper marketing team that had demand generation function, field marketing function, brand function, that all led to the demand generation piece.
Interesting. So you were actual boots on the ground, carrying a bag, selling for a good while before you then shifted into that, which I think is a different perspective than most marketers I talk to haven't ever carried a bag, haven't sold a 5-figure, let alone a 6-figure deal kind of in their careers and that whole bit there. And that often I think is one of the things that can create kind of that misalignment. Is just, it feels like you've never done this, understand it. And marketing kind of feels the same way towards sales. So you definitely had a different, I'll call it, upbringing, kind of going through that motion there that a lot of marketers don't. What do you think is important for marketers to know? Because not all of them can go through that and kind of have carried a bag. Like, what are the types of things that you think they should understand about sales, or how could they get an appreciation for what that carrying a bag looks like?
I think there's, again, kind of back to two schools of thought. In my eyes, there's two types of marketers out there. There's marketing for communication, and marketing for, let's call it marketing for communication. It's almost like the warm and fluffy, fuzzy stuff that nobody can understand, that's untraceable and can't be measured. And it's all important stuff. But then on the other side, there's marketing for revenue. And I think the marketing for revenue people are the people that get a seat at the table. Marketing should own a number, not own a lead number, but own a actual number that's got a dollar sign in front of it. And that's the only way I think that businesses, particularly in this modern economy where it's a little tougher out there, we don't have the luxury as marketers as just being able to put things out into the market and test them and blah, 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 blah. There's just a far greater accountability now than I think that there's ever has been.
Yeah, I have to be careful sometimes when I always call it fluff and stuff marketing, and I've had the chance to come in and take over a few teams where they'd send an email, or if you saw an ad, they would take credit for the account and or for the lead or right the opportunities. They went through that, and you talk to the CFO, you talk to the sales team, and they're like, "Yeah, marketing had nothing to do with that." And so I call those kind of fluff and stuff marketing teams, and they are kind of out there in the world still today, surprisingly. But there is a spot for brand, and I have to be careful when I kind of lump fluff and stuff marketing with brand is one piece there, and I've made this mistake in my past but Udi, the former CMO of Gong, was talking about like brand is what your prospects and customers kind of say about you when you're not in the room, kind of like character, right? What
Yeah.
people say about you when you're not in the room. And that's everybody at a company's job. And that's actually a really important thing. That's not the colors and the palette and the voice, right? That I think a lot of us, when we hear brand, we think about that stuff. And so that's where I always try to break those two apart, even in my head nowadays. Of brand is more that what's the character of your company, and then you've got the color palettes and those things that are important, right? Because that's brand identity and those types of things. But to your point, um, it's really critical to get a seat at the table to have something where, hey, um, we're going to drive X amount of pipeline, and we're also motivated to see that all the way through to close one revenue at the end of the day there. But one thing I run into a lot is marketers often will stop maybe at pipeline. As they're going through that, hey, I generated X amount of pipeline, now it's on the sales to close it. Where do you see that line in there, or what function in marketing should be looking down funnel, or how do you view that side of the world?
Yeah. So I say, we talk about a lot about the customer journey or the customer journey map or whatever it is. Customer journey is all well and good because that's when I think you can start to look at the really predictable behaviors that they have once they're in the journey or once they're in the flow or the funnel, whatever you want to call it. I look at the buyer consideration journey. Like, what are the parts of that journey where the buyers actually, what are the parts of that journey where marketing can influence the buying consideration? Where can you influence that experience? Now, very early on, does marketing influence that experience with the messaging that resonates on the website or the visual aesthetics and things like that? And then we move further along, and then we look at, once they're engaged, can marketing influence that experience by perhaps sending some swag or these gifting platforms that exist and things like that? They're critical to that part of the journey. And then once they get on a first call, has marketing influenced that experience by ensuring that the staff member internally has enough of the right knowledge or understanding of the brand that they're actually able to sell it? Which kind of leads me to this point on the side. You can have all the software in the world, but if your sales guy can't connect with the person, articulate the value that your organization is providing, well, that software is for nothing. So
Right.
I think
Right.
marketing's got such a massive role to play across all parts of the journey, which makes it even more complicated and more of a challenge for marketing in this day and age compared to the days where money was flowing so freely, etc.
It's interesting. I had the experience previous in my career where, um, by all accounts, you would say marketing was doing really well. They were doing their job. Um, they were 94% of leads generated were from the defined ICP, it was agreed upon with sales. Um, and they were turning into opportunities, right? Sales was accepting these meetings and saying, hey, these are good. And what's interesting to your point on that, and this is where I think product marketing can have a huge impact on pipeline in partnering with sales, is it's about, right, the discovery conversations that sales is having. It's about making sure that they can tell a compelling story with either demos, and having an obvious next step as to what to go to next, and that they can really understand and carry on that conversation. They have the collateral that they need to carry on that conversation. And the sales team was really struggling, honestly, to continue things forward beyond the first meeting. And the way we diagnosed it was we did a loss review. We took a look at it and said, hey, what's our main loss reason? And again, traditionally, this might be a sales role, but I found that marketing was kind of the one that was the being blamed, I guess, candidly, as you go through that. And so they took a look at it and it was, hey, number one loss reason was unresponsive. Well, you say, okay, well, what's going on there? And you can take a look at the sequences. Okay, sales is only sending, 2.5 emails on average to these. Well, what do those say? And they're kind of generic messaging as you go through that. And you go and say, okay, well, what happened in the meeting? Why aren't we getting to that next meeting? And it was kind of misses in disco and storytelling and slide collateral. And the solution to it, instead of pointing fingers back and forth, is saying, okay, how do we refine the sales process? What's the enablement needed? How do we do better storytelling to then influence throughout the whole process there? Was kind of an experience that I know I've had in my career, and I know a lot of people have had, because in that instance, you can either point fingers back and forth, but at the end of the day, revenue is not coming into the business.
Yep.
And so how do you solve it? And I'd be curious, A, your reaction to that, but B, kind of, is that a thing you've seen come across a couple times in your career? How do you turn that into a partnership as opposed to a finger pointing relationship?
When and my agency does this, and particularly well as well, when you're doing the brand foundation work, when you're establishing the positioning and the messaging and all those type of things, we talk about including internal stakeholders. And internal stakeholders, when you're doing it for a software company, generally include the founder, the head of marketing, all the people that understand the trajectory of the business, but very rarely do they include the stakeholders who are the salespeople and the frontline workers. So when you don't include the salespeople and frontline workers, what you end up with is positioning and messaging that is potentially kind of inaccurate, because you haven't considered the feedback from the people that are experiencing it on a day-to-day basis. It's got two problems. One, not only is it inaccurate, two, it gets no adoption from those people. The very people that it's intended to serve or help don't use it. And I've seen situations where almost one person in a 30-person sales team and a 400-person organization has been responsible for almost setting the entire narrative of the brand, because they were so in tune with what was happening. And without that person's insights, there probably would have been a very small, very minimal adoption of that messaging across the org.
I think that's a really key point. I've given this coaching before to younger marketers. It's like, especially individual contributors, where they may not feel like they can bring people along, or they have the title to do these types of things. But the importance, especially when you're working on sales collateral and this positioning and messaging, this whole bit, is you can choose to run your marathon of whatever project you're working on and cross the finish line by yourself in the middle of the night. There's nobody there. There's no applause. There's nobody crossing the finish line with you. Or it might take you a little bit longer, but you work with the team. You bring them along so that they feel ownership of that message. It also creates accountability for them as well, as to if they push back or say, hey, this doesn't work for XYZ reasons. Like, well, why didn't you give that feedback when we were working together on it? Yeah. But ideally, the final product is something everyone believes in, because otherwise it's marketing just coming up with something and saying, you have to use this because this is, dictated by XYZ. And I've known sellers in my life to know that they'll use that PowerPoint deck that's on their desktop from 3 years ago if they don't believe in the current messaging, right? It just because that's what they believe works. And so it's critical to involve people, like you said, but then bring them along with you. You can't just ignore their inputs, but you have to address them and look at them, because the other warning light that I often will say is, consensus leads to the least hated idea that nobody actually likes and is passionate about. And so there's a balance you got to strike between those two.
Yeah, 100%.
So You mentioned kind of modern marketing as we've been talking here a little bit. In your eyes today, from what you're seeing in the world around us, what does it mean to be a modern marketer versus someone who's kind of using the same old playbook that they've been using for 3, 4 years now?
I don't necessarily know if it's what it means to be a modern marketer, but I can go off what I'm seeing in the market, right? You
Yeah.
know, I went to a conference mid-pandemic, probably 2021, maybe early 2022. Economy was still relatively strong. I remember going to the conference. I remember meeting the CMO of this software company, and I met the VP of brand, the VP of demand gen, the VP of web, the VP of this, the VP of that, and they just had so many specialists within the marketing team. There were so many VP level heads of, and I think we're not going to see that going forward. I think we're going to see more core teams of these broader, holistic, generalist marketers that bring in
Mm.
the fractional role players to get through critical peak times and peak moments. I think the days are gone where some of these organizations are going to be able to carry that many full-time employees just on the marketing side. And I think you see it now with how many fractional CMOs there are coming into the market. There wouldn't be that many if there wasn't demand for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, that's going to be the way forward. Fractional work that supports a much smaller core full-time team within an organization.
Hmm. That's an interesting angle and perspective on that.
Fractionals
Um,
for everybody though. I think people need to be careful. Just because you came out of an organization and you may have lost your job or you decided to do something different, fractional's pretty tricky. And it's pretty muddy and unclear out there at the moment. It's almost like the Wild West. And the really good ones, I think, are starting to get frustrated with the amount of fractional people there are coming into the market. And everyone's just calling themselves fractional without really having a full understanding of what it means to be fractional, how to
right.
appropriately position yourself and price yourself in the market. I mean, just because this guy over here is charging 250, 300 an hour doesn't mean you get the right to do that. This guy's been doing fractional for 10 years and has 5 key clients that he works with. You're just getting into it. And then what happens is the person that buys that person for 250 an hour and gets underwhelmed with the results kind of wrecks it for the guy that's charging 250 an hour that knocks it out of the park every week.
Yeah. Well, and you can't be a the John Miller has a quote of, you have your majors and your minors, and you can't be a major in everything. And
Yeah.
so you need to know where your strengths are um, in that space and be very clear where you're not strong. And don't try to do those things you're not strong in, because right, that also I think creates a bad rap to your point there. So kind of being very clear on that is really key. Um, that kind of feeds a little bit into a conversation we had before we hopped on here, which was around this whole motion of service design.
Mhm.
And how do you start to think about service delivery? And, we could use fractional as an example or other examples throughout that. But, you know, how do you start to think about that holistic experience? It kind of gets into the brand character almost of
Yeah.
it's the holistic experience with the brand. It's not just the digital, the physical, human, all those things. So I'd love to dive into that a little bit. Like, number one, what do you mean when you were saying service design when we were talking there? Because I don't think that's a term everybody's familiar with. And
Yeah.
then would love to dive into kind of the organizational design. How do you actually think that way and execute that way?
Yeah. Service design, this has kind of been oh man, I've had some conflict over this word over the past few years. There's service design, which the people that practice service design think that everybody knows it. I put a poll out on LinkedIn when polls were really popular, and I think 15% of people never heard of it. The argument internally in my organisation was, well, then sorry, 15% heard of it, 85% had never heard of it. The argument
Right.
internally was, well, those 85% of people aren't aren't prospective clients of ours. Like, come on, give me a break. Service design, in my eyes, refers to the total experience, right? I'll go back a bit. When you look at competitive B2B software companies, as an example, the products that they're selling are exactly the same, right? Exactly the same. I don't care what feature function, there's like little nuances and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, it's the same stuff. The only thing that differentiates you isn't the features in the product, because they're all the same. It's the experience that you provide that differentiates you from what your competition is doing. It's the same at law firms. It's the same as insurance benefits providers. It's the same as pharmaceutical companies almost, right? What is the experience that you're providing to that person? The experience comes in a number of different forms. It's the human experience, which is the brand, how people experience your brand. It's the digital experience, how they experience your organization through any digital touch points. And then it's the physical experience, how they experience your brand through the interactions that they have with people. And I think as marketers, we lean heavily on the brand. We lean heavily in the web, that part of the digital product. But we don't spend enough time on the people side of it. And we certainly don't spend enough time trying to influence the experience on the product. And the amount of times that I've heard people say, our brand's strong, our website's strong, our people are great, and our product just sucks. Or a founder will come to us and say, our product is by far and away superior to our competitor product. Why aren't people buying it? Well, people aren't buying it because I go to your website and it sucks. The messaging on it sucks. I don't understand what it is that you do or the benefit that you provide to me or the value that you provide. And so when I talk about service design or the total experience, it's simultaneously elevating that experience across all of those areas versus doing it in silos and having strong aspects of your business and weaker aspects of your business. Because just like when you fly with an airline, the airline's role is to get you from point A to point B on time. If you go from point A to point B on time, and that's great, you should get 10 out of 10 for that. But if the hostess or the host is rude to you, then you've got a negative feeling towards it. If the in-flight digital experience in the seat in front of you doesn't work, then you've got a negative experience. If the seat doesn't recline or the tray table doesn't come down, you've got a negative. There's all these things that go into all the things that can affect the experience that you have outside of the actual purpose of what it is that you're doing.
So who, if anybody, would you say is doing service design well today? Like, what would be an example of a company that you think is nailing it?
I love Southwest Airlines. Love Southwest Airlines. And this is the gift that keeps on giving when it comes to using Southwest as an example. Southwest have a great brand as far as positioning. They know who they're targeting, the messaging, always fun, whimsical types of messaging, very distinctive colors. We all know the yellow, red, and blue aircraft. So they've got the brand side of it, the human experience kind of nailed. The physical experience is differentiated. Whether you like it or not, you stand in line, you get that number system, right? So that's different, unique. The in-person experience that you have with flight attendants is unique because Southwest encourages their flight attendants or their staff to live the brand in their own unique way. So you always get something a little different on the aircraft. And the digital experience. I love the Southwest Airlines app. I think it's by far and away the easiest app to use in the entire market. I think you can change flights, you can get credits. It's, versus American Airlines, you get on the app to change a flight and it gives you, shows up a 1-800 number for you to call. That's not the purpose of wanting to use that app. Well, I think Southwest do great. Back to my point about things that can screw up your experience. I sat at the airport once going on spring break at 5 a.m. I think it was 2 spring breaks ago where Southwest's entire computer system went down across the country.
Oh, yeah.
And
I remember that.
My kids are a little older, so it wasn't that much of a strain, but I could see families with young kids. We had a 6-hour delay. For a 2-hour flight, we had a 6-hour delay. And that was the technology failing the experience. And so
Mm-hmm.
while Southwest on my eyes were such this pinnacle, they were the mecca of this, it got destroyed. And people, I'll never fly Southwest again, and blah 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 blah. Like that's the example that I love to use over and over and over again.
Well, and what's interesting is that it doesn't take much, right? It takes one bad experience to completely create, doubt in your promise to these people as you go through that. I think it's the same in B2B software is in anything in B2B is you have a promise, right? That your sales team has sold into your customer base, and now the company has to deliver on that. And I think people are willing to give a little bit of grace in that, like, hey, if something doesn't work well, like, what are you going to do to make it right?
Mhm.
And they'll give you a couple of those, especially if you make it right well, I guess. So, but you only get a couple chances as you go through that. And so it's really important for, I think, brands to, number one, look at how do they make sure that they're going to deliver on that brand promise. And then more often than not, it's often worth defining kind of what is our make it right motion going to be, so you're not scrambling if or when something happens, right? A cyber attack happens, your systems go down, there's an outage. Um, like Facebook, I think recently just had an UI update that kicked like half the world out of their accounts. Um, and those little things add up in people's experiences and in their eyes as they go through that. And so having thought through those different motions are really important because we we have a natural tendency to kind of distrust in B2B a little bit of, you promise all these great things. A, can you deliver on it? B, can my team actually be successful in accomplishing what you've promised to me as you go through that there? So I think those are just a couple key things that brands should really be thinking about.
Yeah, 100%.
So, one thing that I know came up that was kind of an interesting piece in our conversation was, um, uh, you you play in a band,
Yeah.
right? If I'm correct, in that, remind me the instrument again.
Oh, I sing and play guitar in a little acoustic duo.
That's right, because we were talking about the experience that you've created and how that's differentiated
Yeah.
even for you, right? This is a side gig, but talk a little bit more about that. How are you winning with a service design motion in that when this is your side gig, not even your main full-time gig, but I know you're winning as you go through that.
Yeah, it ties back to what I was saying about these new fractional CMOs that are hitting the market. They're behaving and promoting themselves in such a poor way. They're doing everything opposite to what they would do within an organization, within a company that they're representing. And like what I mean by that, so I'm playing this little acoustic duo. I'm not going to give the name away. Let's just do that. I don't want people looking me up and spamming me. But we wanted to establish a digital presence. I'm not going to build a website and then try and get promotion and eyeballs on that too hard. So we signed up to a platform, a booking platform. It's like a virtual agent, and you can set up your own profile on there. So, putting it through that service design motion, as you referred to it, what is the human experience? What is the physical experience? And what is the digital experience? So the human experience is the brand. We spent some money designing a logo. We spent some money uniquely tailoring what it is that we do to the market, make us fun, make us likable, so that people kind of immediately, when they see the name, see the logo, see the people, see the imagery, see the photos that we use, they like us, right? Because they're looking to have a good time. They also, when you're signing up a band or hiring a band, you don't know what you're getting. You get a bunch of drug addicts come to my house and get drunk and trash the joint. Like, I know it's not the 70s and 80s and we're not Motley Crue, but people are apprehensive about who they book. So we've got
Yeah.
that. So, okay, we like the look of these guys and we understand what they're all about. The second is the digital experience. The amount of bands that are listed on this platform that don't have a single video or a photo or anything like that, it's just text, right? So if they're coming to the digital experience, give them the digital experience. Give them everything at their fingertips, right? And then the physical experience. I've set it up so that I get dinged on my phone immediately once we get an inquiry.
Hmm.
Right? my salesman comes out that if you respond to someone within 5 minutes, you're more likely to get the deal. So I get dinged. The very first thing that I do, right? This accent doesn't hurt when it comes to selling, right? The very first thing that I do is take a video, and I'm like, hey Jeff, just got the inquiry for the gig on the 27th. Would love to chat more with you about that. We are available on that night. I've checked with the guitarist. We're good to go. Here's my number. You've got all my details, but let's talk through it. So then they get this video instantaneously. They know I'm available. They'll either pick up the phone and call, or they've got this you've already established a connection. And if they've sent that inquiry out to 5 or 6 other people, in the same way that when you're vetting agencies or when you're vetting software, you vet 5 or 6. Who can create the experience the fastest? And that's what we've been very, very good at doing with the band.
I think that's a big thing that definitely for agencies I would take note of, but I think just brands in general is when your buying committee finally raises their hand, right? They're looking for almost speed to information at that point, and they've got questions and they want to start engaging and having thought through what those questions might be like. What do these guys sound like? What do they look like? Right. And putting all that at their fingertips and then making that come to life, I think is really key. And that's not just for bands. I think every, B2B company should be thinking along the same lines. And how do they empower their BDR, their SDRs, their sales teams to accomplish kind of that same vein.
Yeah.
So,
critical.
Yeah. So I'd love to ask this question. This one I love to ask everybody is, to your comment, there's a lot of MarTech, sales tech out there, a lot of promises, a lot of not delivering on those promises, but everybody always has those 1, 2, or 3 things that they really believe in, tools. What are your 3 must-have technologies in your stack?
Yeah. The one, it moves and shifts so quickly. Some type of, the key one I think is some type of personalization and automation tool that can reach volume. We had a lot of success with this a few years ago in email, and almost overnight it just stopped working.
Yes.
And then we actually used the same kind of concept, personalization, automation, to reach the masses through LinkedIn. There's so much software out there. And we had great success with that early. And I'm starting to see that fall away a little bit as more competitors come onto the market, more people start to use it. I think some type of automation and personalization is absolutely critical. Whatever it is for your industry, find out what that is and then start to use that. The other one is I'm just trying to think of having a tool that you understand who's actually visiting your website, not demographics and things like that, but actual, there's so many tools out there that you can drill down to the actual person, email address, phone number of the visitors that come to your website. Not only is that great for testing whether your campaigns are working, ensuring that you got the right ICP that are visiting your website and all those type of good things, but it actually enables your sales team with lists and lists of people that have actually been and interacted with your website, so they're familiar with your product. It can be a little creepy, and you've got to set some type of cadence before you start just kind of blanket calling people 30 seconds after they've been to your website. But there's something intriguing about that. The third one isn't software, and that's probably not a good one to answer. And it's kind of weird. These announced pioneers. This was gone a long time ago. I'm sure what too. But I don't really feel like a high noon. The third one is the ability to hold a conversation and connect with someone on an authentic human level, because all of this software is for nothing if you can't hold a conversation with someone and make some type of a connection. Now, when I talk about connection, I'm not talking you have to make a deal with the person that you're talking to, but I talk about connection that some of my best relationships that I've had over the past 7 or 8 years have yielded $0 in actual spend between me and the person, but many millions of dollars in referrals and recommendations and things like that. So I think it's critical that you're able to kind of continue to interact with people and not hide behind the software.
Interesting. No, I definitely agree on that. I think for some people, the pandemic kind of took away their small talk capabilities and things like that. But at the end of the day, we're doing business with humans, and we want to do business with humans that we trust and that we think will, if I introduce you to someone that reflects on my personal brand, right, and how that goes through that motion there, and do I believe in you and those types of things. So, no, I think those are three good ones.
Yeah, I had a young seller. I'll never forget this, and certainly there's certain colleagues in my organization, or my old organization, that will never forget this either. It was early in the morning, and I happened to be walking past the reception phone, no receptionist on. Phone rang, and I picked it up. This young kid on the other end, I don't know how long he'd been trying to get hold of me, but he finally got me on the phone. He's finally got the buyer that he wants on the phone. And he made an absolute mess of this call. Absolute stinker. Absolute howler. I could not have gone any worse. And I said to him, this isn't going very well. And his answer was, it's not, is it? And I said, it's not. I said, here's my cell phone. Like, I always want to give a young kid a chance. Here's my cell phone number. Go away, compose yourself, right? And give me a call in 15 minutes. And this kid came back, dusted himself off, gave a pretty good pitch. But it just goes to show he had his one shot and he got to the right person and he made an absolute mess of it.
Yeah, it's, you're pretty gracious to give him a second shot, right? I think most people have never sat in the shoes and done the job of the SDR, BDR, right? Of just they get used and abused all the time. I have such respect for them, and especially for the ones that are successful, but especially the young junior ones, like they freeze when they finally get you on the phone. And one thing I like to remind execs of, because I constantly hear this, the BDR SDR team should be able to do more. They should be able to do more. They should be able to get more meetings. They should be able to write all those types of things. And the reality is, and I love to ask this question back, is, hey, Mrs. Mr. Executive, how many meetings have you taken in the last week? Right, as you go through that type of thing in the last month, because you're somebody's ICP, you're somebody's person they want to get a meeting with on some target list somewhere, and the answer is typically maybe one, more often than not zero. And so that's where wanting them to have have that grace and also understand how hard that job is. I mean, that was awesome that you gave them a second chance. Did you buy?
No, I didn't buy, but I'm going to give you another example. People buy from people that they like. And if I'm going to answer, like when I'm driving, I generally answer the phone, right? If I'm sitting down, my phone's ringing, I'm not answering. So if I'm driving, got nothing to do, for a 20-minute drive, I'll answer it. Phone rings. This young kid, phone rang, answered it. He launched into his pitch. And I said to him, my exit is 2 miles away, right? You've got 2 miles of me driving 70 miles an hour to give me your absolute best pitch. And this kid absolutely turned it on, right? It was phenomenal. Right? So I spoke to him all the way, got home, got his details, and we actually ended up buying it was intent data software. I don't want to give the company away. It was a competitor to 6 Sense and Rollworks. It was in that space. Nice. His product was just the same as everybody else's. The price was slightly cheaper, not a huge amount, but I like this kid so much. He made me laugh, but he didn't blow his opportunity when he finally got something on the phone. And you buy from people that you like.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important part that a lot of people forget nowadays. Well, I know we're coming towards the end of our time here on this, but I wanted to ask one last kind of question, which is, if you could go back in time and give yourself or a junior marketer today, what is one piece of advice that you think they really need to hear, or your younger self really needed to hear, to set themselves up for success, to move ahead, to win in today's environment?
Yeah, start in sales. Start working on the sales side before you jump across. And not only to get into marketing, but to position you to be great in any part of running a business. If you know how to sell, and you know how to sell yourself, and you know how to make yourself likable and all of those things, it'll serve you well in every other part of the business that you go into. Specifically to marketing, it'll just give you insights it will give you insights as a marketer that you won't get from textbooks and on-the-job training. Or if you are a marketer that's not comfortable being on the sales side, because not for everybody, it is difficult, make sure you spend time with sales leaders and the sales team, because they're the ones that are going to influence how good you are at your job. But I think you said it earlier, they're the people that are going to give you the insights that are going to make you a much better marketer with their frontline experience.
Yeah, you probably just gave a panic attack to a bunch of marketers who feel they're too far in their career to go back and restart in sales there. But I think I would add on to that. If you're at that point in your career and you probably don't feel like you can rewind and start there again, like spending time with your sellers, getting access to call recordings, either with Gong or Chorus, and listening can be another good way to at least absorb a good amount of that. Hear the questions that are being asked, hear the objections, hear when a fluff and stuff pitch is just not resonating and what is resonating with the market, and being able to talk to those types of things. So, I'll have to panic on that side, but definitely so I'm guessing a few people are like, oh no, well, I'm too far along in my career to do that anymore.
No, it's, yeah, you're right. I'm not suggesting anyone go back, but listen to the sales guys a bit more.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Well, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on Marketing Hops, and this was a really fun conversation. I know you're empty, but I will say cheers one more time, and would love to have you back on again in the future.
Yeah, Jeff, thank you so much for having me. Cool concept. I love the chat.